Hey guys, Madisyn here with Horse Training by Madisyn, but today I want to talk about stalling your horses. I personally do not stall my horses. I never have. I am so lucky to have pasture space at my house. As you know, I mentioned about thinking about the natural state of the horse a lot during my videos and such, and that's basically what my entire training and all these videos and everything I'm doing is about. Because I think people recently are straying away from doing natural things for the horse, and we're kind of starting to treat these animals more like our children or our babies. And let me tell you, I treat my horses kind of like my children, but I also keep in mind that they are animals and they are horses and they do not think like humans or children. So they may have characteristics of your child or a young kid. They might act like one, but they still are an animal. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I don't stall my horses and why I don't think you should stall your horses. But first off, I want to say I totally understand there are a lot of people out there that don't have pasture space, that board their horses, that their horses only get a certain amount of pasture time, or they come in to eat at night and spend the night in the stall. And I understand that. If you do stall or board in a barn where your horse has to be in a stall, this is just what I think and science has shown me about stalling your horses. And if someday your goal is to be able to move into a house where you can have pastures and it's just temporary, that's great. But hopefully after this video, if that wasn't your goal, I hope it will be. So let's start off with why I don't stall my horses. Horses are naturally herd animals. They are their descendants and the way that their brain is wired. Horses naturally like to have multiple horses around them, or a buddy and a partner. And I'm not saying that there's a few horses that don't mind being alone. There's lots of horses that, are an only horse in a pasture, and they do just fine. But normally, a normal horse, they're herd animals. You don't see just a random horse out in the wild and that's it. So when you do stall your horse, when it's usually a stall would be 12 feet by 12 feet, and you put a horse alone in a stall, science has actually proven that within a week, your horse's stress levels just skyrocket, and they can start to crib, pace, have high anxiety, ulcers, let's see if I can say this right, gastrointestinal issues. Those are all things that are a product of stalling your horses. And the reason for that is because these horses' natural instinct, even if they grew up in a stall, their natural instinct inside their body is telling them this isn't right. Because history of horses and everything has always been together, horses together in a wide open pasture. They've always been free roaming, grazing in big groups. So you can see when you put your horse in a stall, that's going against everything natural for the horse, being in herds. And yeah, there's a horse kind of right next to it, but there's a barrier. It's not the same as free roaming out with another horse, being able to do what's natural, which is eat with their head down, which I'll make another video about why you shouldn't feed your horse up in a hay manger, but we'll save that for a different video. But everything that's natural to a horse, the stall is doing the opposite. So naturally, it gives them high anxiety, which can lead to ulcers in their stomach, which can lead to pacing, which can lead to cribbing. And then horses actually can become addicted to that behavior, and that's hard to break. And then, as you know, horses don't really do well in very high stressful environments, and it does a lot of wear and tear on their body and their mind. They're very, very sensitive animals, and they're very, very in touch with their energy and such. So that's why I don't stall my horses, because it's very unnatural and it raises their anxiety. And you find more people who are riding an English disposition, jumpers and such, that stall their horses, bathe their horses more, do all those kinds of things. And those horses have been proven scientifically to have more anxiety issues, to have bad behaviors in the stall. They get bored and they want to bite on things, or they need a jolly ball in there, because what else are you going to do? It's like if you're going to be locked in your room, but you don't have a computer, you don't have a phone, you don't have a TV. I mean, what would you do? Probably aren't going to feel very good. Just like a horse, us human beings, we're active people. Just like horses, they're active. Basically, you see more behavioral, mental, physical problems when they're in horses that are stalled more or stalled at all. Now, the exception obviously is if your horse is hurt and needs to be on stall rest. What are you going to do? You have to. And of course, it's going to stink. They're going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be locked up in a stall, but it's for their own benefit and it's temporary. But, and a lot of people put their horses in at night to feed. And I get that because each horse needs different feed. And some horses are a bully and will eat another horse's feed. Or if you have an older horse that needs special treatment, I get that. I used to have an old Mini that recently passed away. She was almost 40 years old. Her name was Rescue, but she was super old. She needed a lot of rice bran and fatteners. She just was not, just got to that point in her life where she was having a really hard time keeping on weight. So I would remove her at night in the morning to give her her special grain and her special feed. But immediately I would come back out an hour later and I'd let her right back out for the entire night, and I wait in the morning. I just keep her in her stall for a minute and let her for an hour and let her eat, and I turn her right back out. I don't bring her in for the night. And I get, if you board somewhere and you might not live too close to your boarding stable, you can't just, I'm going to go over there in another hour. That doesn't seem reasonable, and I understand that. But I hope your horse at least gets let out in a pasture in the morning. Also, another thing is pasture space. Like you could say, my horse has a run-in, but how big is that run-in? Because a horse naturally is a free roamer. So I like to have at least minimum an acre a horse. I prefer more, and I know it can be kind of annoying to go catch them, or some horses like to run away, but that is part of owning horses. If you don't want to go walk out and catch them, maybe you shouldn't have a horse. We shouldn't be doing things at the horse's expense just because we don't want to deal with it. That means that might not be the right fit. So usually I like to say an acre a horse, so they can move their legs and eat and graze and move around just like a natural horse in the wild would. In doing that, my horses have never had ulcers, never came up lame. I mean, I've had my horse get an abscess or two. She gets one about every other year just because of the weather, and she's her hooves don't take well when the weather changes, and that usually resolves itself in just 3 days. Literally noticed my horses don't ever have digestive issues. I've never had a horse colic. I've never had a horse crib. I don't have horses that pace. So once again, try to put yourself in the horse's mindset. Would you want to be locked in a stall all day? Would you want to be in a dry lot all day? I don't think so. And so, once again, I understand sometimes we're limited to our resources. If you are available to have a pasture and keep your horse out in the pasture, or get them out there as much as possible, that I think you would see a lot more physical, mental, and even emotional health with that horse. I've noticed a huge decrease in horses that went from a stall to a pasture with gait issues, trailering issues. Naturally, everything is connected in a horse, just kind of like in our bodies, but with horses, it's a little bit heightened. So when something's wrong here, the root is usually somewhere over here that you wouldn't even think about. But I have just noticed the more and more I make my horses in their own natural state, what would be most natural to them, I've seen success in the barrel racing arena, my horses and I's relationship, my horses' overall health, just everywhere I've seen it be helpful just a little bit. It is scientifically proven that horses do not naturally do well in the stall. So it's just something to think about. Ask that boarding owner to possibly kick out your horse after feeding, or if you know you're going to come ride that day and you're like, I'll just keep him in the stall so I can ride, but really you're going to keep that horse locked up and its joints and everything's not going to be, and the blood's not flowing, their heart rate isn't going up, then you're going to go do their exercise. That's not going to be good for your horse's body either. So everything about kicking a horse out in the pasture is just great for everything really overall. So if you can, do it. If you can't, hopefully have that goal of someday being able to have your horse out in that pasture, or maybe even find a new place to board, because I really think you'll see huge differences. Another thing that's negative about stalling your horse is a horse's lungs and mucus in their nose is really sensitive, and when the horse is walking around the stall like that, it kicks up a lot of dust and they're breathing that in, and they see a lot of lung and airway issues which can cause something called inflammatory airway disease, IAD. So that's something to think about as well. And all those particles in the air from you cleaning out stalls or all the dust that's being kicked up in that area is really not good for your horse at all and its overall health. So if you do keep your horse in a stall for an amount of time, make sure there's really good ventilation and good airflow in there, because you don't want to be getting a bunch of junk in your horse's lungs and then trying to run that horse. Another thing, a plus about keeping your horse in the pasture is for overall fitness is bone density, and the amount a horse walks out in the pasture versus in the stall is just huge, and that's just overall great for physical health. You see horses that are out in the pasture, the older they get, the less that they have arthritis, because this horse isn't stocked up all day, then being active whenever it's ridden and then going back to stocked up. Naturally, walking around in the pasture promotes fluid to be created in between the joints. And lastly, I know a lot of people stall their horses due to weather, and I live in Oregon and it's very, very wet here. But my horses have the option to come in and out of their stall or their run-in. Basically, my barn is attached to my pastures, and I just made a little cutout so my horses can go in and out as they please. And I also have a lot of trees in my pasture for them to get cover, and I leave that open all year around, and really I never find my horses in the stall, not even if it's pouring down rain. I have a nice warm waterproof blanket on all of my horses during the winter, and they choose to be out and stand in the rain, even if they can come in their stall or stand under a tree, just like natural horses in the wild would hide under a tree, or they lay down to get their body heat. If you're saying it's cruel to keep your horse out in the rain, really that's what they have long coats for. And if you're worried about their horse's hair getting long, once again, we don't want to do things at the expense of the horse just because it makes it easier for us. It's more natural for the horses to grow their winter coat to keep them warm and insulated for the winter. So throw a really warm blanket on your horse and let it go out in the pasture. So I hope you learned something new today. And I'm not bashing on the people that stall horses, because one, maybe they had no idea that this is how a horse feels. Two, maybe that's what they're limited to. That's all that they have. They live in a neighborhood, or they don't have pasture space, and they love horses and want to have them. But these are just things to think about. So in the future, moving forward, you guys can be educated and make the best decision for you and your horse. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you like what you're seeing in my videos, please hit that like button and subscribe. You'll be notified every time I make a video. Feel free to comment, leave me a little note, and if you want to hear more, you can also comment on video ideas. I love to hear from you guys. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can look on my blog, www.horsetrainingbymadisyn.com. Find me on Facebook, Horse Training by Madisyn. My phone number is on my Facebook and my blog. And if you want to follow me on Instagram and see what I'm up to all the time, my Instagram is also Horse Training by Madisyn. So I hope you guys enjoyed this today. See you later.